All right, I think we are live. It is Friday, September 9th, 2016 at 1 o'clock Eastern Time, and this is a special episode of Higher Ed Live. I am your host, Amy Jorgensen. On today's live broadcast, we'll be talking about the Integrated Marketing Academy at the HighEdWeb's conference. It's going to be happening in Memphis. The Integrated Marketing Academy is designed to introduce the concept of integrated marketing communication in the higher education environment. Marketing Live is part of a Higher Ed Live network offering viewers direct access to the best and brightest minds in education. Live broadcasts allow viewers to share knowledge and participate in discussions around the most important issues in the industry. Today's live viewing experience is powered by Maestro, the premier marketing tech platform for broadcasters. All episodes of Marketing Live are free and accessible in the video archives at higheredlive.com and in podcast format on iTunes. Higher Ed Live is produced by M. Stoner, a marketing and communications firm that works with education institutions on branding, strategy, web design, and more. I'd like to welcome our guests. We have Alan Etkin, a senior analyst for web analytics at the British Columbia Institute of Technology. Welcome, Alan.
Thank you.
We also have Seth Odell. He's the VP for Creative and Marketing Strategy at Helix Education. Welcome, Seth.
Great to be here.
And I think Bob is going to be trying to join us, if at all possible. He's having some technical issues over in Iowa. He said it was the mountains in Iowa, so hopefully he'll be able to, something about the Wi-Fi connection with the mountains. So hopefully he'll be able to join us, and if he does, we'll dive into some of his topics. So as we go through the topics, if you do have any questions, please feel free to join in using hashtag HigherEdLive on Twitter, and I'll do my best to ask Seth and Alan for their insight as best I can. All right, great. So first we're going to start off with Alan. So your topic is you're going to be providing examples on how to use web analytics to report on the value of your website in online marketing. So can you provide kind of a summary of what they're going to learn and gain at the Integrated Marketing Academy with your session?
Sure. Thank you for the introduction. I'm really focused on measuring the performance of the way we spend money at BCIT. We put lots of money out on our marketing efforts. We put lots of money into efforts on the, on campus or in events. So the question that we always face is, okay, well, how did that do? Right? We put a bunch of bucks out. How did it do? So I use Google Analytics, the free version of it, and we've got a really extensive implementation of Google Analytics. We've set up goals to track our key conversions. We've monetized those goals, and with that in place, we're able to assign value to the outcome of every campaign that we run. During my session at the conference, I'll be looking at exactly the steps you need to take in order to reach that point. And I'll be giving some examples, very specific examples of what we're doing at BCIT. It'll give you an idea of the potential to use this technology, these techniques to give you a sense of how well you're doing with the money you're spending.
Wonderful. That's really cool. And I love that you mentioned that these are the free analytics, because a lot of times when it comes to marketing, they're always trying to get the extra, a little bit of extra money here and there. And with Google Analytics, you now can pay a fortune to trying to get all this information. And in higher ed, all of our budgets are so limited. So being able to, get that free stuff is awesome.
Yeah, it works well depending on the size of your campus and the volume of traffic that you've got coming through. There's a point where it becomes a little more challenging because of the way Google samples your data. It obscures some of the numbers that you want to see. But there are some techniques to get around that, and I'll be talking about that as well.
Wonderful. So one of the things that I saw in your description is that you're going to try and explain how you can get everybody on the same Google Analytics. And that is just, like the holy grail. I would love if we had that at the University of Virginia, because so often I get asked, I think that was Bob right there trying to call me. So often we get asked, are these good numbers? Are you getting good hits when it comes to the website with how many people you get how many hits a month? Is that good or is that bad? And it's all relative based on the institution and what other areas are getting. So being able to have it all in one spot would be so cool, to be able to be like, well, here's what we're getting, and here's what housing is getting, and here's what, student affairs is getting.
Yeah, and it's critical if you to take advantage of the techniques that we use here at BCIT, you need to have the same account on all of your properties. Because if you've got a central marketing campaign that's driving people to, say, a campaign landing site, and then you've got a different Google Analytics account on your school site, so the campaign drives people to the campaign landing site, there's some promotional effort on that site that pushes people off to your school site, and then the conversion takes place sometime later, maybe 6 months later or 3 months later on your school site. It's really hard to tie it together. Actually, it's impossible to tie it together if you're not using the same Google Analytics account. Or a couple other little tricks you can use, but they're problematic. So I'll be going to that in detail.
Awesome. And I'm excited. Do you go into goals? Because that is like one of the hardest things to be able to set up the right way. And I would love to learn how to do that.
Yeah, like the steps, you got to get your same Google Analytics account on all properties. You've got to identify what your key goals are, which isn't all that difficult. I mean, applications, registrations, requests for information, lead generation. And then you track those, and then a little bit of a trick to monetize them, to try to figure out what each and every application is worth to your institution. So I'll be talking about that. My session, basically, it's a bit of a case study of how we did it at BCIT, all the steps that we took, and it'll give you a really good sense of what's required to make it work on your campus. And then we'll get into the examples, which are really fun.
That's so cool. And I love the idea of the monetization, being able to say, this web click equals this amount of money, because a lot of people, they're only looking at the bottom line. They're like, yeah, but if they look at this many web pages, it brings them down in the funnel of getting them set on things, and being able to say that this web page has this value would be, that would be amazing.
Yeah, you can get it, once you've got your goal set up, tracked, monetized, you can get down to understanding the value each page presents in the conversion funnel.
That's so cool. I love that. So what do you think is probably the most, what is a kind of a good teaser, something that like you definitely, like, we gotta go just to be able to learn this one thing, like the big key takeaway?
Well, I think once you've got the fundamentals in place, and I'm hoping that folks who are in the room will have that, there's some things you can do with segmentation that's terrific. We've created recently an interesting campaign site that's really unconventional. It's one of those odd projects that's really easy to say no to, like, don't do that, that's stupid. So we created the site, we tracked it with our main Google Analytics code, and we're actually able to see the value that people who visit that site represent to our business. And that silly little site, it's double the value of our usual visitors. So you can start to connect things where it's not just an opinion, oh, well, that's a dumb idea. You can go, well, maybe it is, but let's measure and see what's actually taking place. So that's cool. A great trick.
I love that. And being able to segment and pull stuff down, that's really neat. So that's awesome. Well, I'm so excited to see your presentation, Alan. I can't wait to get a lot of those details and bring them back to the University of Virginia down here. And then let's dive into Seth. Let's talk a little bit about your topic. So you're the VP of Creative and Marketing Strategy at Helix Education, and you're leading attendees through what makes a great campaign, from neuromarketing to messaging hierarchy. So can you kind of give me a summary of what that means?
Absolutely. So I'm actually incredibly excited about this workshop. So I'm very much looking forward to it. So often when I attend conferences, we talk pretty high level, and it's a little bit more theory and a little less practice. And so one of the things I'm excited about, even just after hearing Alan talk, is the fact that we can get really in the weeds here and walk through at a level that just normally we're not able to. So in my case, I'm trying to tackle the very large subject of actually building an integrated marketing campaign. And the reality is, while that's different for each institution, I mean, whether you're recruiting high school students or adult students, out of state, international, or local students just down the road, even though it's different, I think the approach is really pretty consistently the same. And so we're going to literally walk through that approach. And so the way we approach that, or the work that we do at Helix, is we approach it in 4 phases: research, strategy, creative, campaign. And it's really through that order. And so I'm going to really walk through what are the fundamentals from a research perspective that you need to have before you actually are building an integrated marketing campaign, and not just like research, like, oh, go hire a research agency and pay them a ton of money. Like, what are the things and the cheap ways and the hacks that you can do it on your own? And if people have big budgets, I will say research is fantastic. It's some of the funnest work. But if you don't, I'm going to be sharing like totally free, cheap, easy ways that you can spend a half hour of your time and glean really valuable insights. That one's really fun. We really look at that kind of as far as within research. I bucket it like who's your audience, what are your offerings, and then what's your position and perception of market. And we'll walk through those. And then the strategy piece, I'm going to be walking through in pretty good detail as well, which is really looking at first the foundation, which are what are the core kind of questions that need answered, which typically are, who are we, where are we today, where do we want to go, what do we do, why do we do it, why us? And then working through some of the fundamentals, unique selling propositions, value propositions, first and secondary reasons to believe and how that works, both from a concept and just presenting it as an actual exercise so people ideally can take it as a template and both work through it during the workshop but then bring it back with them to the institution. And then the fun part that I love the most is really going to dive into the creative a lot too. So the creative that comes from the strategy into the campaign. So I'm going to be sharing some fun tips and tricks. I'm really passionate about neuromarketing, which is understanding sort of actually how people make decisions and the fact that a lot of decisions, at least in many ways, are subconscious, not conscious. And how can we create content that engages with folks in a manner that resonates with them. And then finally, we get to the fourth phase, which is campaign, where we're really going to talk about how do you identify the right channels? How do you measure those channels? And that's what I'm excited for Alan's talk is that you got to measure it if you're doing it. And so we're going to work through that and then work through really the simplest budget exercise I can, which is actually taking your established goals, identifying your milestones in the decision-making process, and backing yourself out to a campaign budget, which is just looking at your cost per status stage, like what's the cost to get someone to the website? What's the cost to get someone to come on a campus tour? What's the cost to get them to apply? And working through that. While it varies at every institution, there's some consistencies there. And so it's really important that when we talk about marketing campaigns, we're not just talking about top of the funnel, driving interest and awareness. We're talking about what are those pieces and decisions. And we'll go through all that as well. So the hope is to really walk linearly through that process and provide people a chance literally in the room to give feedback and share. I'm not the expert. The folks in the room are the experts. I'm just there to curate, facilitate, and help. And then give them also a roadmap they can take back and use, ideally, because it's one that's worked really well, both when I worked with SNU, UCLA, but also all the partners I work with here at Helix. So in a nutshell, that's what I'm covering. And I'm glad they're giving me a full hour and 45 minutes because I'm sure I'm going to use the whole thing up.
Okay, so there's so much in there I want to ask you about now. Okay, first thing, what is SNU?
So SNU, Southern New Hampshire University, which is where I worked prior to joining Helix. So I was there for 4 years. I left a little over a year ago. I joined Helix in July of 2015. So before that, I had 3 different positions with Southern New Hampshire University.
Very cool. And then I love that you're going in so much into the goals and making sure that those are aligned, because so often, even in my office here, everyone's got different agendas of what they're trying to do, and everyone thinks that the goal is something different, and making sure that it's very much tied in. That's so smart. And then give us a taste of what neuromarketing is. So how do I subconsciously purchase something?
Sure. So I'll give you the lighter version. We're going to go into depth a little bit, but there's a general belief and opinion that the vast majority of our initial decisions that we make are subconscious. And so essentially, one of the analogies that's used is they talk about the elephant and the rider. And that in many ways, our brains are first the elephant, which is this natural animalistic reactionary kind of creature that's more feeling oriented. And then we have our sort of conscious brains where we really process and analyze and kind of question thought. And those are 2 separate things. And so when we're marketing to someone, we first have that initial impression, which is more emotional, a visceral reaction. And then we have to speak to someone's process-oriented mind. So an example is how you communicate at different stages of a decision have to change. And so like on a website, people typically, once they get to the website, are process-oriented. They're actually looking and they're analyzing and they're having a conversation in their brain. So you want to analyze and position information in a manner that is answering the questions the voice in their head has, which is, how much does this program cost? How does it work? How is this going to go? What are the benefits of this? The simple things like using questions as headlines actually can prompt someone to continue and read down the page further because it actually encourages them and makes them question the benefit they'll get. But just to get them to the website, it's a little bit different. You don't always want to be practical. You want to be more emotional. So instead of information, it's inspiration. And so I talk a lot about everything from, like, if you're doing television or even direct mail pieces, this goes back to the stuff that, what's the card stock feel like in the fingers? Like, what are the natural reactions? So often in life, we feel a certain way, and then we try to rationalize and justify that in our heads. Like, why are we mad or why are we upset? That initial feeling is actually the first thing we have to appeal to when driving a decision. And then once we get that person to take an action, we have to change the conversation really quickly and address sort of their more thoughtful, analytical mind. And so I don't know if that made any sense, but it's really to me the long and short is, like, when I did television work at Southern New Hampshire, I still do some TV work here at Helix. One of the things is, like, the message on TV has to fundamentally change. And so what you say at a television ad is different than what you say on the website. One of the big mistakes I think we make in higher ed is we kind of figure out what our value propositions are, like why should someone choose us, and then we say that same thing all across the collateral that we create. And it's really important that we have a messaging hierarchy that communicates things differently. The analogy I like to use is that car commercials don't sell cars. It's not the job of a car commercial to sell a car. The job is to get you to the lot, and it's the salesperson's job to get you in the car. And so what's in a commercial, like a Jeep commercial's job, is to make me feel like my life's boring. They communicate emotionally. There's mountains, there's mud puddles. It's exciting. It makes me feel something. And that feeling is a sense of adventure and a sense of willingness and openness to a world that I thought was gone. It makes me feel good. And so weekend comes around and I drive by the lot and I'm going to stop because I remember that feeling that I want to capture. But once I walk there, you can't give me that Americana rah-rah feeling. You have to get me in the car. And then it's features and benefits, features and benefits. Turn the knob, open the window, do these things. And so often in higher ed, we don't do a great job of that, which is understanding exactly where someone is in the decision-making process, whatever that decision is, to go back to school, to donate money, to attend an event, and understanding that we have to communicate the message differently based on that stage, and that we need to understand what they're looking for. Because sometimes in some points we're very analytical and process-oriented, we're the rider, and other times we're the elephant. We're the big creature that naturally likes or doesn't like things that we don't know why, because subconsciously we're just reacting. And we have to appeal to those two brains differently. And so it's clearly, I like to nerd out on it. And so we're going to walk through it a lot. And I'm going to share some really practical stuff with people because it's not going to, like, earth shatter everything as far as performance goes, but it is just a different way to sort of look at how you communicate an integrated marketing campaign where there's multiple messages, multiple touch points, multiple places within the decision-making process. So we'll be looking at all of that in pretty granular detail, which will be a lot of fun.
That's so cool. And I have to say, I love your explanation of the elephant. I think I dated a couple of those guys in college where it's like, I don't know why I'm mad, but I'm mad. I don't know why I'm hungry right now, but I'm hungry.
And then you try to rationalize it, right? And and you're trying in your head, they're trying to explain why, but they don't know why. And that's how life works. I mean, the reality is going to school or going back to school for most people is the second largest purchase decision in their life. Oh, yeah. Only outside of buying a house. And yet it's an incredibly emotional decision. And we know that so much of it is, well, why are you going to this institution? Because of how it felt on a campus tour. Well, what does that even mean, how it felt? What fed into that feeling? How do we even understand that and pinpoint that? But that's the reality, is we make major life decisions. We tell ourselves we're making it based on the information that's available and it's very practical, but more often than not, we're actually making it in many ways just on a visceral emotional reaction to how we responded to something when we experienced it for the first time. And so when it comes to marketing, it's really fun to kind of look at it those two different ways.
That's so cool. And I think that's a really good analogy of like how we need to set things up. Because I mean, when Disney's trying to get people to go down there, they don't tell you about the cost of the tickets. They don't tell you about, the different events that are going on. They just show this video of these kids that are just looking up and there's Tinkerbell or, whatever it is. And it appeals to your emotional side. And that lures you in of like, man, I should make, it's like, I don't know how much it costs, but I need to go to their website now, or I need to go check this out.
Totally.
Awesome.
Disney's a phenomenal example. You're right, actually, of just an organization that really, really understands this concept far better than I do, obviously, and does it incredibly well. But very, very good example of one that kind of has mastered a lot of this.
That's awesome. And I'm so excited about us nerding out with all of your different details. That sounds so cool. How do you, because I've seen some information about how the psychology of colors, when you have printed materials or websites, whatever, how that can interact, like how that relates to how someone perceives the information. If you print something out with orange, it's going to have, even if those are your school colors. I'm at the University of Virginia. We have orange. That promotes anxiety. That promotes, it also shows energy, but it's not like a restless, soft color that's going to be like, oh, this is regal. Like, yep. Cognizant what those colors mean.
Well, and your color one's a great point, Matt, because we're actually going to talk about that as well while we're out there, because there's sort of different layers to color psychology. One of those is just looking at overall color reaction, like yellow. I mean, there's a reason Post-its are yellow. It's because it's a positive reminder tool. But beyond that, there's also been a ton of testing around like what's the right call to action color. And it's weird because sometimes it's been red and at times it's been blue, and sometimes it's been orange based on the studies that you look at. But the reality is it's actually none of those. What it is it's the color that is that is the least amount of real estate on the page. And so we've seen institutions that will take a red button, which sometimes can perform really well, but their color is red and the banner is red and the navigation is red and what you've done is you've buried the call to action. And so the first and foremost thing is it has to stand out. So it should be a prominent color, ideally, but it should also be, in a perfect world, and it often can't be this, it should be the opposite color of all other colors on the page. And it should only appear at a call to action. Your call to action color should never appear anywhere else because it should be drawing the eye. And so we're going to talk through that stuff too, because it's sort of like, the reality is it's not just red or just blue. It's the idea of understanding that it's how that color is working in the environment and the information in which it's provided that will really determine how people react to it.
That's brilliant. And I didn't even think about that, having the call to action be a different color. Because I mean, everyone wants to do a red button, or I mean, at the University of Virginia, we use orange buttons all the time, but orange is everywhere else. So maybe we should be using green. Who knows?
Exactly. And that's I think, and this actually goes all the way back to, but how do you test and measure that? Well, the beauty is we have a session on Google Analytics here that's going to be so in depth that it's going to be a lot easier to understand that you can look at how people engage within pages and within content. That powers at our fingertips. So one of the things I love is I think that these sessions are going to line up really well, because I'm going to tell people all sorts of things that they should be doing, but the reality is it's never just do this or that. It's do something in this range, but let the data drive you. How do you get the data out? In almost all cases, it is the analytics that's looking at the performance. And so I actually think we're going to all feed off each other really well as far as giving people a lot to think about.
That's awesome.
Seth, as you're speaking, my mind's going crazy. Like I'm going, okay, we can test that by doing this, right? We can even test visitor type stage by from print materials to the website. You can track that. And then behavior on the website to the next stage, you can track that too. So yeah, there's lots of interesting things. I'm looking forward to how these sessions line up.
Absolutely, me too.
So cool. All right, so I also want to welcome Bob. I don't think that we're able to get the visual on his screen working, but he tells me that he's here. Bob, are you there?
I am.
Wonderful. Well, I'd like to welcome you so much for joining us. Bob
Thank you.
He's a Senior VP for Strategy at StatMats, and he'll be presenting an in-depth review on integrated marketing communications with an emphasis on developing strategy and plans. So can you give us a little bit of a summary of your session and what you're going to be doing and what we can gain from it?
Yeah, the goal is really to sort of develop the framework upon which you might hang a lot of different marketing activities like you've been chatting about for the past few minutes. So we're going to deal with the political issues related to marketing. We're going to be dealing with how marketing might be organized at a given institution, depending on different circumstances. We're going to look at budgeting, particularly continual budgeting rather than just one-time budgeting. And we're also going to be looking at how do you measure the results of different marketing activities, including building on the Google Analytics, but there's a lot more to measurement than that. The whole notion behind that portion is really how do you measure return on investment? Because nobody has enough money to do all the marketing they want. So how do you know where to spend your money, and how do you have confidence in the money that you are spending?
That's awesome. That's very, very cool. So what is one of the big things that we're going to be like kind of your big teaser of what we would get in your session that you're excited about, that we should definitely sign up for just so we can hear more about it?
I think it's interesting that a lot of colleges do marketing for a year or so when they're disappointed in the results. The part that kind of lurks behind the curtain is, what are the real possibilities with marketing? In other words, what are the characteristics and the qualities that define a market-ready institution, so to speak? American expectations is really, really critical. And again, back to the resources, which is not just money, but sometimes resources are political in nature, sometimes they're time in nature, sometimes they're talent in nature. So it's really, how do all the different pieces fit together, and when one piece isn't working, how do you identify what the opportunities are to fix that element of the marketing strategy?
I love that. That's very cool. Well, and I think your session is all day on Saturday, right? On October 15th?
It's a good portion of Saturday afternoon, I think, yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm very excited about this show and what we're going to be doing at the Integrated Marketing Academy. So it is held in Memphis on October 15th and 16th. And this program is going to be an interactive learning experience in a small group setting. So there still is an opportunity to go sign up for it on the HighEdWeb.org website. You can go check it out. We have a diversity of speakers that are going to be presenting. We have folks from the industry and higher education that I think are going to offer a really neat perspective. And I think that with talking with you guys, there's everything from how to kind of get started all the way to how to do some really cool in-depth stuff. So it seems like it's going to be really, really neat. We also have a couple of other presenters that are going to be at the Integrated Marketing Academy. Greg and Voltaire from M. Stoner are going to be presenting an integrated approach to storytelling. So they have some really cool stuff. And then I am the only girl in the group, and I'll be presenting on selling strategies. So I'll be representing the ladies in the house and talking about how to, I think probably emphasizing more on what the guys are all talking about, getting in some of the buy-in, getting some of the goals, and then when you're actually implementing everything, how are you going to get all these folks on board and getting them excited about, and keeping that excitement throughout the process, and making sure that they kind of have some ownership when it comes to, everything that's going through, and it's not just, oh, they're just doing marketing over there, or, oh, this person's doing this element, this person's doing this element. How can you keep everybody on board and excited and delivering all sorts of good stuff? So yeah, and then looking on Twitter, it looks like we got some good engagement where people are retweeting a lot of our stuff about the different topics. Is there anything that you guys want to add about the Integrated Marketing Academy in Memphis before we tune off?
I think I would add it's a really good idea if you've got a marketing team, get as many of the team members at the session as possible, because what often happens is somebody says, oh, I got it, I wish the rest of the folks are here, I want to take this back to campus, and sometimes things do get lost in translation.
That's a really good idea. Having, at least having two of your team in there can, build a good a foundation of going back and getting everybody else on board.
I'm just very excited, looking forward to it. I think the way you've stacked up the speakers is going to be really valuable. And again, I do love going to conferences and connecting, but I think in particular workshops like this where you can just go deeper a lot of times provide just so much value, because it goes just from theory to practical and tactical. And I think so many times just that's some of the gold nuggets that you can bring back where you can just apply it the next day and sort of immediately start to see a benefit.
I love that. Yeah, and having those really tangible things afterwards of like, here's actually how I can implement something. Here's a whole bunch of resources. I know in my session I have a crazy amount of handouts that I'm getting ready to go. So that way, when you need to make a Gantt chart, or if you need to make, all this stuff's going to be ready for you to make sure you're keeping folks on board. Awesome. And Alan, is there anything else you want to add before we tune off? I think you're going to probably be able to tell us the monetization of the whole program and how well we did.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the session. I think it's going to be great. The amount of time that we have to talk about this in detail. I'm hoping that people come with questions. I'll certainly be providing a lot of examples and a lot of hands-on little tiny tweaks that you can do to your existing implementation. So hopefully able to add stuff to folks who are already deep into this, and give folks who are new to it an overview of where they have to go.
Awesome. Well, I'd like to thank you all for joining us today, and I'm sorry about some of the complications you had, Bob, but we're so glad you were able to at least get your voice on. I think this is even better. We have you this way. You're like the big, powerful Oz. Like, we don't know what you're behind the curtain.
Yeah, you don't want to know.
All right, wonderful. So again, held in Memphis on October 15th and 16th, this intense program offers an interactive learning experience in a small group setting. So sign up while there's still spaces. I'd like to thank you again to our sponsor, M. Stoner, and thank you for joining us today. Make sure to check out for more shows on Higher Ed Pros on higheredlive.com, and we will see you guys next time.
Good. Thank you.